Yo Zenith Nation, welcome back to Catch The Zenith, the podcast where I document my journey to get better in life and business. Today we've got another episode of Zenith Reflections where I comment on some of my most interesting posts from the week on X. And by the way, if you're new here to this podcast, I'm Nicola. I'm currently building an AI startup while also writing my master thesis in startup entrepreneurship. With that said, let's get started. First post. This is a quote by Warren Buffett. You will continue to suffer if you have an emotional reaction to everything that is said to you. True power is sitting back and observing things with logic. True power is restraint. If words control you, that means everyone else can control you. Breathe and allow things to pass. And in that regard, another quote by Mark Manson. He said, "One of the most beneficial traits in love and in life, be nearly impossible to offend." I think those two quotes are some kind of related, and let me explain why. When we start being more rational, we can see things how they really are. We have less room for interpretation and more focusing on the facts at hand. And at the same time, you are less prone to be offended by something if you just listen to it, try to understand, and look at the facts. I'm not arguing that it's always or asserting that it's always easy to do that. Quite frankly, the opposite, especially if our minds is pulling us in all different sorts of direction, what we could actually say or react to a external stimuli. Let's be it like a conversation where somebody's a little bit rude or you're having a bad day, whatever it might be. But especially, I would say in conversation, this is so powerful, and in general when it comes to relationships. So logic, not always easy to implement, but so powerful. And yeah, it's because I think we human beings, obviously, we have emotions inside of, obviously, but the more we can, let's say, obviously we need to reflect about our emotions and think about those kind of things, but rationality makes life sometimes so calming to just focus on the facts and not thinking all about all the other things. And I also came across this idea of using logic when arguing with illogical people is illogical. Let me explain that one. So when there is someone in front of you, you're having a conversation, and this person is a logical person. So like when making an argument is based on the facts at hand or trying to speak the truth, then it's quite convenient. You can have a productive, constructive conversation. However, on the flip side, if you're talking to someone who is quite illogical based on their behavior, actions they took in the past, and you try to reason with logic, this in itself is kind of illogical because you try to use logic together with or in a conversation with an illogical person. And I find that just helpful as a quick reminder in terms of whom I want to surround myself with. And those are mostly logical people with whom you can have a normal, quote unquote, normal conversation, or let's say a conversation that is not going all over the place where you put in too many emotions that you can't focus on the things that matter. Next one. This is a quote by Naval Ravikant, which I reposted on X. He said, "The basis for friendship, relationship, partnership isn't proximity or time spent together, it's values." Nowadays, a lot of people, for instance, in the field of leadership, talk a lot about values. And the reason for that is because they are quite powerful. If you have proper values and you live up to them as an organization, they can be really powerful and motivating for a lot of folks. Now, when we're talking about values, I read a chapter in the book Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. Now, and why I'm bringing that up, I came across this chapter because it talks about how to structure your values based on this gives you like a step-by-step guide. First of all, how to come up with your values and then to prioritize them. And I found that as an advice in terms of relationship by actually Leila Hormozi gave this advice, because Leila Hormozi is the wife of Alex Hormozi. And I found it quite interesting when she when she was looking for a spouse, for a partner in life, she made a list of different things that are important to her that she expects from the other person, or like things that are important to her, values, traits, etc. And actually this chapter of Tony Robbins gives you like the explanation. You can use that not only in relationships, but also in any partnership basically, but also for yourself, that you know which values you have. And then it gives you a kind of explanation or step-by-step guide, like how then to prioritize those values, because maybe love or maybe honesty is an important value to you, but actually what is more important? Is it love or is it honesty? And you can ask that, hey, if you need to choose between those two values, which comes first? And then it helps you to rank those values according to your answer. And you can do that with each value in a list you created. And I did a similar thing before I actually came across this chapter. By the way, it's in the book Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. Chapter is called Value Hierarchies, the Ultimate Judgment of Success. It's a really good chapter. Highly can recommend that. Personally, I also wrote down my personal values, which was a really helpful exercise. What I actually did, more precise, was I created like a one-pager where I wrote down a problem statement, a vision for my life, a mission, and the top 3 core values that I have, basically. And then within each of those 3 values, I wrote down some rules and principles that help me to navigate life better. And this was a really helpful exercise. It's similar like a business, basically. You have a problem statement. So this is the problem you want to solve. Then you have a vision. Yeah, ultimately the long-term, the big picture thing. And then a mission that is a little bit more specific what you're doing right now. And then 3 values that help you, okay, if I have a difficult decision in front of me, how do I approach this decision, for instance? And then you can look at those values. And within those values, certain rules that help me then to even better be able to navigate life, what to do in certain situations. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. One principle or rule I have is never neglect the basics. Sleep, 8 hours at the same bedtimes, then also nutrition, 95% clean, whole foods, and fitness 5 times per week, like hitting the gym. That's a really important thing to me, and I wrote that down. So long story short, why I'm bringing that up, I think values is a really powerful thing, and there is a beautiful quote by Tony Robbins from this chapter I mentioned before. He wrote, "There's no closer way to bond people There's no closer way to bond people than to align them through their highest values. That's why a committed force fighting for its country will almost always defeat a group of mercenaries." I found it really powerful, and this simply underlines the point that if two or more people have something shared in common, values, they are able to achieve so much more, as opposed to if they are just like a group of people doing something together without a shared thing, like something that unites them somehow. And circling back to the initial quote by Naval Ravikant, which was, the basis for friendship, relationship, partnership isn't proximity or time spent together, it's values. It's really like that, you know, because if you don't have shared values, you don't really understand each other. And I found that a powerful exercise to if you have a really good friend or a business partner or your spouse in a relationship, to sit together and really make both prepare like a list of things that are important to them, like top 10, top 20. The other person does the same. And then you have like a strategy session, or a session actually, where we sit together and ask, okay, this is really important to you. Yeah, this is also important to me. But how important is this value to you? Like, is it like a top 1 priority? Is honesty top 1 and integrity and loyalty? Or, for instance, is health also important to you, but how important is it? More like second place or third place, whatever. And then you have a pretty good understanding of what the other person values. And interestingly, sometimes if you listen to the other person, the way they speak, or not more the words they use, you have already a pretty good understanding like what they value. Like if your friend always talks about his family and that he, for instance, likes a balanced life, then you already have a good understanding, like, okay, family perhaps, and balance could be like a value, over 2 values to him. And yeah, I found that exercise personally also really helpful to write down my values. And after I did that, later then I came across this chapter by Tony Robbins, and that helped me even more to understand how important values are, and how to refine my existing one-pager I did with my values, because this is a thing that can change over time. Like, it's not like a thing that is made in stone that values can change. Maybe now, if you're in a certain season where you say no to a lot of things and you focus on your business or on your profession, whatever it might be, then you have a certain set of values. However, if you are in another season later on throughout your life, maybe another value becomes more important. Like before, it used to be work, like work hard, or work ethic is a strong work ethic is one value. And later it becomes more family, because you start having a marriage, you're married, you have children, etc. So long story short, values really powerful. Highly can recommend this book, or especially because I only read the chapter Value Hierarchies, the Ultimate Judgment of Success. You can look it up. I hope that helps. Next one. Living a boring life creates the best dopamine. This, I really, really love that. So, quick story. When I got into this self-improvement, self-help world, I started to live a more and more pretty focused life. And with focus, I mean a deep life. In other words, doing one thing at a time, and applying this principle, how you do one thing is how you do everything. Like, in other words, the same intensity you deploy when working out, you also try to attain when working or when having a conversation. So you live a pretty intense life, no matter what kind of domain we are speaking about. And interestingly, when you are doing that and you are doing productive things, less destructive things, you are stimulating your brain with healthy stuff. Let me explain. So imagine yourself all the time consuming short form content and eating junk food, a lot of sugar, like having no structure in your life at all, drinking maybe alcohol, taking drugs, whatever. If you're doing that, your baseline of dopamine is pretty high. So you need a lot of stimulation to kick your brain into gear, basically. And that can lead then into the situation where we start procrastinating, for instance. And I had a similar thing in the past when I was maybe before 7 7 years, roughly like that. I was like in a similar situation where I watched short form content. I was not working out as consistently as I used to, and I was partying a little bit more. And then over time, I realized that, okay, what is so powerful is if you get your dopamine from healthy stuff, working out, cold showers, a protein heavy, healthy nutrition or diet, sorry. If you do one thing at a time, if you use deep work sessions and shallow work sessions when you work, in other words, like doing one thing at a time, deep work, then having shallow work sessions where you do more emails and multitasking stuff, but you distinguish between those things. What ends up happening is that your dopamine baseline becomes lower and lower, or at least this is what happened in my case, and you start getting stimulation way faster from work, as opposed to if you have a pretty high dopamine baseline, then it's way harder to get you stimulated by work. And a cool exercise, I mentioned that in a previous episode, is when you want to reset your dopamine, like use your Sunday and everything, you're only allowed to drink water, read, and go for a walk. That's all. And because what ends up happening if you do that for 24 hours, you're like, really, the stimulation is pretty low. And then on Monday, when you start again working, work becomes actually quite stimulating. Not necessarily, depends a little bit, of course, at what point you are in your journey. But I think that's sometimes a good way how to reset. And I did that personally, not from today to tomorrow, when I got into this self-improvement world back in 2019 roughly. It was like a process. Like first I just focused on university. I worked really hard in my second semester doing my bachelor's degree. And then when this worked out, I started to take on starting a new project, which was basically this podcast. I started to create the WordPress website, learn about that kind of stuff, how to create like a WordPress website, start publishing podcasts and so on. So like a second project, and I started again in summer 2019 to work out pretty consistently, because I always worked out, sometimes a little bit less with breaks and then a little bit more. And at that point I said, okay, now till the rest of my life, I want to work out consistently. And that's what I'm doing basically since then, always 5 times per week. And this was one of the most powerful things I started to do. And you see a little bit. And then once that worked together with a healthy diet, the ball started to roll. Like it was like a reinforcing thing, because one thing worked out, then I took on another thing, and then another thing, and it's so powerful. And the dopamine level is simply, and you need less stimulation to get the ball rolling, and I found it so powerful. So long story short, if you then live a more boring life, so you are not chasing like the next dopamine hit, you don't need to jump out of a plane base jumping to get your dopamine hit, or drinking alcohol, taking drugs, or eating junk food. You're getting the dopamine bath from working out, taking cold shower, eating a protein heavy diet, working in a meaningful job, or starting your own business. I found that so powerful. Next one. Within 60 minutes, and that's what I wrote, within 60 minutes, everyone reveals whether they are a dirtbag or not in a podcast interview. That's why we need more long-form podcasts with relevant personalities. It's the best way to get a solid read on someone. So I really love podcasts, obviously. I'm also a podcast host myself. And I remember watching the Donald Trump interview on Joe Rogan. And I really like the concept of a politician is going on a long form podcast, like having a long conversation, and not like a scripted interview, like question, answer. No, it's like a conversation. And I think that's so powerful, no matter on what political side you are. It's a great way how to learn about someone and to see, are they actually solid in their arguments? Do they have like a point to make that actually makes sense? And I think, and that's the reason, part of the reason why in general I love podcasting so much. Within 60 minutes, you can learn a lot about a person. Like, because we not only communicate obviously with the words we speak, but also with our mimic, with our face, obviously, with our body, facial expression. And like that, you can, quite frankly, no one can hide for 60 minutes if they speak, like, if they are a bad person, I believe. But also the flip side is true. Like, you pretty fast have a good understanding if someone is a genuine person. And that's quite cool. So more power to long-form podcasts like Joe Rogan or Huberman or Jordan Peterson or Alex Ramosi also did some long-form. Modern Wisdom, Chris Williamson, of course, Tim Ferriss, all the good stuff. So yeah, great way. And it's quite a privilege, quite frankly, to listen nowadays to all those creative, smart people out there. The information is all out there. Like whether it's through getting through knowledge through podcasts or books, it's all out there. But the point I wanted to make is, okay, if you listen for minimum 60 minutes to someone, you have a pretty good picture if this person is, let's say, quote unquote, a good or not so good person. Yeah. Hey Zenith Nation, quick break. Each Sunday, I write a free newsletter called Zenith Sunday. In it, I share simple lessons I learn about doing better work and living a better life. It's short, easy to read, and costs nothing. If you would like a little boost each week, sign up below. And now, back to the show. Next one. The person who desires to leave things better than he found them, who does more than his share, who is not attached to rewards, who is always seeking to benefit others, who knows he is cared for and rewarded by the universe for his every effort, is able to act selflessly, without expectation of a reward or a return, without thought of advantage, and of him it is said, he is better than the best, and of course he is greatly rewarded. Now I want to focus particularly on the person who desires to leave things better than he found them, because I think that's the essence of this quote, or an important aspect of it. Whenever you interact with people, whenever you enter a room, and that's a funny example, but if you go to the restroom, also then you can apply this principle. Leave things better than you found them. Like on the restroom, you clean your stuff, basically. You make sure that when you leave the restroom, it's cleaner than before. And that could mean like cleaning the sink, like there where you wash your hands and don't leave everything wet. But so few people do that right now. And I'm sometimes like, I'm in the airplane and going to pee and I see there like the water is all over the place. And I'm not saying I was always perfect in the past, but quite frankly, for myself, that is just like the standard. I want to leave things better. And I give you an example. I just lived in another city for 2 months. A friend of mine, he was on holiday, so I could rent his apartment, basically. When I left his apartment, I tried to do a really good job to leave it better than I found it. Obviously, I washed the bed stuff, the pillow stuff, and you know what I mean, like everything clean, washed everything in the wash machine. I vacuumed the floor. I cleaned everything that I could clean. I wrote a quick note to him and I bought as a thank you a protein bar. So I wanted to leave things better than I found them. And it doesn't require a lot of effort, but I think especially if we are aiming for long-term friendship, partnership, relationships, then this is so powerful because people will think about you, hey, that person, that was quite nice, you know, this person actually cared. As opposed to if someone does the absolute minimum. And especially when we talk about partnership, friendships, etc., like if you do always a little bit more, and if you, for instance, if you both of like, if you have like a deal together and you need to pay someone $50 and you pay 51, people are more likely to do business again with you. So you're not a greedy guy. You always give a little bit more, you know, and if you always give a little bit more, that compounds over time. And a lot of people will think, hey, it's actually great to do business with you because, yeah, I don't need to worry or be scared that you will act badly. You genuinely want the best for the other person. Now, circling back, like leaving things better than you found them, you can really apply to anything. Not only when you enter the restroom or go out of the restroom to leave it cleaner, but also when it comes to people. If you have an interesting conversation with someone and you listen to them, maybe you have also an interesting input. So you also try to leave them better than you found them. And the same applies at work when you prepare, when you have a meeting, you prepare properly 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, an entire day, depending on what about the meeting is. And then you have the meeting and you have a great meeting and you leave people and the organization better than you found them. So there are so many fields of application of this principle. Next one. And this is, let me quickly pull that up. This is basically a post I reposted by Dickie Bosch, and he had like a quick post about some of his podcast episodes he really liked, and one of those episodes was Modern Wisdom with George Mack, Mental Models 101. You can search for that, like Mental Models 101, Modern Wisdom, and you will then find this episode. And I just listened almost twice to that, or actually twice, yesterday and today in the gym. And such a powerful episode. They talk about the mental models of Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. Maybe you know they have a lot of powerful mental models, like, for instance, reasoning from this, but it is a little bit more than Elon model, but reasoning from first principles, or thinking in second, third, fourth order consequences. That means like whenever you do something, you think, what is the first consequence? Example, I work out in the gym, I feel better. But what's the second order consequence? Yeah, I have more energy throughout the day. And then the third consequence is that I will live longer, and so on and so forth. You get the gist, and you can really apply that to anything. Like, okay, what is the first order consequence when I eat junk food? Yeah, okay, my dopamine level is now pretty high and I feel satisfied. But the second order consequence is, okay, maybe my digestion doesn't work the next day pretty good. And then the third order consequence is that, yeah, I will increase the likelihood that I will have diabetes or whatever. And I found that really powerful, because then whatever you do, you not only think about the direct consequence of your behavior, but also long-term wise. And especially when it comes to health, this is a long-term thing. It's not like a short-term investment. And it makes everything a little bit easier then, because you know, okay, actually, yeah, I need to stick to it, and it's a long-term thing. So long story short, but this episode, really powerful. They talk about various mental models you can apply in your life. And I hope you liked the episode, Modern Wisdom with George Mack, Mental Models 101. It's a episode I think it was published 5 years ago. It's a little bit an older episode of Modern Wisdom, of the Modern Wisdom podcast. And then that brings me to the last one for today, last X post, which is a quote by Chris Williamson. He said, adding speed on top of a poor direction is just sending you further in the wrong way. I think that was even a quote from this episode, which I listened. What I found powerful about this is, or what I think is important to understand is what is effectiveness and what is efficiency, because this is the foundation of this quote, basically. Like, effectiveness means doing the right things. Like Peter Drucker, I think, used to say something similar. Effectiveness, doing the right things. So am I actually doing, do I have the right priorities? And then efficiency on the flip side is doing the things right. So you make them with maximum intensity, productivity, efficiency. That is doing the things right. But before talking about, okay, how to improve my productivity and all that kind of stuff, which I love, we need to talk about effectiveness. Am I in the right place? Is this the ballpark I want to be in? Like, or do I need to change directions? And what I personally found really helpful is the self-authoring Suit program by Jordan B. Peterson, which is a program that helps you to write about your life vision. But not only that, you basically write about your past, present, and future. And it really helps you to understand where I want to go, actually. But also, what did I do in the past? And what are, in the present, my flaws and my strengths? You have a really good understanding after that what life is about and where you want to go. And to make sure that you are effective, and then obviously once you are effective and you are doing the right thing, you can become efficient. And I personally did this program. I did the present and future authoring program. It's like a 3-part series, and the past I didn't do because for me at that point was present and future really helpful. And it was a quite intense time. I did that for many, many weeks, even months. Every morning most mornings, I sat down and I wrote for 1 or 2 hours, and I created my life vision, and I wrote about the present, my flaws, which I need to improve, and the things I'm doing great at the moment. And then also when I wrote about the future, it was so helpful because you start writing like, what is my main goal? And then what are the sub goals of that? And then you write about why those goals are important to you, and what do you make sure to not get off track, and what, if you get off track, how to make sure you get back to the main thing. And it guides you really through this process of creating a life vision. So highly recommend that. All right. So let's wrap that up with this quote. Adding speed on top of poor direction is just sending you further in the wrong way, which we don't want. We want to do the right things. And once we do them, we want to do them as efficiently as possible. Thanks, Chris, for this quote. With that said, guys, thank you very much for listening, and see you in the next one.